Today I'm doing a practice speaking test with Mahmoud, who is from Egypt. He's an accountant looking to go to Canada, which means he needs a band 7 in the IELTS speaking test. So what I want you to do is listen to Mahmoud's answers and try to determine if you think he's going to get a band 7 or not. Now I'm going to ask you some questions about your hometown. Is your hometown far from where you live now?
Yes, basically I'm originally from the southern part of Egypt in Asyut city, but right now I live in Cairo.
And what is the best thing about your hometown?
Yeah, one of the best thing is I believe air pollution is pretty minimizing. I mean, we don't have air pollution or traffic jam, in comparison to in Cairo, where there are a lot of traffic jams and air pollution that, that was the reason from car emissions. And the second part is that being with my friends, engaged with my friends and relatives, because here in Cairo, I still feel like a bit stranger, because I don't have friends. So this is the second part, the second thing that I like my hometown.
And
also, I enjoy.
Thank you.
Whenever I want to. Okay.
Do you have friends that still live in your hometown?
Yes, of course. I have some friends. Basically, for me, as introvert person, I have just a small circle of friends. So I basically focus on genuine and quality than quantity.
And is your hometown a good place to raise children?
Actually, it depends. Some families, they have good experience, or they're intellectual, how to raise their children in a good manner, etiquette, how to teach them to be etiquette. And other families, they just don't have, some of them are they have less knowledge to raise children properly. So it depends.
Now I'm going to ask you some questions about trees. Do you like trees?
Of course. I like tree. Whenever I have free time, I like to, surround myself with nature, being in trees. And because, I believe trees has benefits, because studies have shown that trees can increase oxygen intake and can decrease or lower the key CO2, so there are a lot of things that I like in nature.
And
I enjoy
Are there many trees where you live?
Yes, in my hometown there are a lot of trees and agricultural lands, because most of my small town is located near the river, which is considered the source of life, and we cater the agricultural land with essential.
And have you ever planted any trees?
As far as I can remember, when I was younger, I think I was like 15 years old. I was younger, so it was for a while. But now I no longer planting a tree, because I live in the city here. It's difficult to find any agriculture or any good agriculture for planting.
And do you ever talk about trees with other people?
Yeah, sometimes when I have conversation, I enjoy talking about nature, basically, to be surrounded with breathtaking landscapes. I prefer to be among to be among nature, like trees, flowers, or gardens.
Thank you. Next, I'm going to give you a topic, and I'd like you to talk about it for 1 to 2 minutes. Before you talk,
Okay.
you will have 1 minute to think about what you're going to say, and you can make notes if you wish. Do you understand?
Okay. Yes, of course.
I would like you to describe a news story that you were interested in. While Mahmoud is making notes, make sure to click on the link in the video description to sign up for my free live feedback lessons on Zoom. Okay, you can start speaking now, please.
Okay, of course. I recall once hearing a news story about reclaiming a new land in my hometown, because we have a lot of desert, desert land in my hometown. So that story, people say that land nobody goes around, because at night there are a lot of supernatural things that happen, and people, aware, like advise people to not get around this place because it's dangerous. Some people, I heard a lot of stories, like I would say, anecdotal stories around that a lot of people got a lot of mental problems after they spend their time, in the dark in that area. So basically, that story has no evidence, but just people talk. I think there's like rumors. And the end of the story, people begin to say it's rumor because this is not true. For me, as a realist person, I don't believe in that such thing, because it's really it doesn't make sense that people can get crazy or get nuts after spending the time. Some of them, they get killed or just totally disappear from this area. So I can conclude that this is not real. It's just rumors, and that story became like a cliche. So people can say it whenever they want to, frighten kids or children, whenever. That's all because most of the family, they try to protect their children.
Thank you. Do you ever talk about this story with other people?
No. I just heard the story because people usually like to narrate this story to their children, because they want to protect their children to not go out to obey their parents. So parents use this story because they want to protect their children to not go out street without without permits or without allowance by the parents.
Thank you. Okay, we've been talking about an interesting news story, and now I'd like to ask you some more general questions related to this topic. First of all, let's discuss newspapers. Is it important for people to follow what's happening in the news?
In my humble opinion, I think it's not generally true that most of the newspaper are manipulated. It's not true. Most of them, they just wanted to mislead people from the truth. So for me personally, I don't like to indulge myself watching any newspaper, because for me, for several things. One of the things is follow the news daily can take a toll on my health, my mental, because can really level up my stress and can make me a lot more dwell and disappear, because a lot of newspaper nowadays, because there are a lot of wars between Gaza, Israel, and between Russia and Ukraine, and so on. So this kind of newspaper are really frustrating, because for me personally, I like to follow the news like once a week. I don't practically follow news regularly like other people. So because for your question, I believe it's not typically right to believe everything. said, whether in a newspaper or on YouTube or other platforms, we should focus more.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And do you think are online newspapers or printed newspapers more popular in your country?
It was in the past. Over the past 10, 15 years, printed newspaper was pretty popular among people, among society, community. But nowadays, people seek their information from online sources. There are a lot of like BBC, Al Jazeera, and others. Along with social media, some people they also like to follow the news from Facebook or even YouTube.
What are the disadvantages of printed newspapers compared to online newspapers?
Well, I believe the disadvantages of because most of printed newspaper are biased because most of them are locally produced within the country. So this is one of these disadvantages. The second thing is buying newspaper every day can also, I believe, follow news online can serve a lot of money because people tend to spend a lot every day, even though the prices is very cheap. But I believe online is more convenient, easier even for whenever when it comes to reading any news online, you feel comfortable using online. But some people found difficult to write. It's not typical difficult, but some people not find comfortable because most of news.
And why do some people prefer to read printed newspapers?
I think some people prefer because, especially old people, I believe all elders, they prefer to read printed because they get used to it since their childhood or since they were younger. They tend to read printed newspaper, thus they still buying. Some of them still buying this newspaper nowadays. But I believe youth or the new generation, are more inclined to seeking their information from online sources.
Why do some people have no interest in following the news?
Yeah, some people just believe that, like a previous mentioned, newspaper can be a lot more stressful, to mentality or mental being, to your psychological aspect. So a lot of people found it. Some people say ignorance is bliss because, but I don't believe. I mean, follow news from time to time is good to know what's going on in our world. But these people just don't like to follow news because some people don't indulge in political because our country also don't like to. We've been ruled by dictatorships here. We don't have democracy. So some people don't like to talk about politics too much because this is going to be harmful.
Thank you very much. That is the end of the IELTS speaking test. Okay, so that was a good performance.
Thank you very much.
I think there are things you can do to improve your score, but overall it's a band 7. You've got a band 7 for fluency,
really?
Band 7 for vocab, band 7 for grammar, and band 7 for pronunciation. So band 7 across the board. So I'm sure you're pleased with that. Okay.
Thank you. Even though some days I can speak more fluently, more faster than this, I just feel a lot confused. I feel my level is not.
There were, especially at the start, there were quite a few pauses.
Oh, yeah,
a lot of ellipses in the beginning. And we'll just talk about fluency first. So definitely pausing too often, that was a problem, more so at the start. And then you kind of got a bit more into the flow and you weren't pausing as much towards the end of part 1. Through part 3, you weren't pausing as much. In part 2, it felt like you were kind of tripping over yourself, like you didn't know what you wanted to say. Was that you didn't know what to talk about, or you couldn't think of vocabulary, or what went wrong? What went wrong in part 2?
I believe the reason that made me tripping while speaking is because I was confused, because I'm not usually that way. When it comes to talking with anyone, I feel like talking fluently. I feel comfortable. because the second part, I'm not usually using camera. I usually using voice call. So
Yeah.
I'm talking with people via phone, voice call using English speaking apps. So I
Yeah.
feel more comfortable. This is the second part that's I feel like tripping too
Yeah.
much.
So I think maybe you could have made better use of your notes to kind of organize your thoughts and make sure you know what you want to talk about. Um, there were times I wasn't sure if it was that you couldn't think of the vocab or you didn't know what you wanted to say. So definitely make better use of notes, and you can practice part two a bit more by yourself to get used to that. There's one more
Yes, of
thing
course.
where there were times where you didn't understand the question. Um, there's one in particular in part one. I asked you, is your hometown a good place to raise kids, to raise
Oh,
children? And your answer wasn't related to that. You were talking about something different.
was it coherent?
No, it was irrelevant. The answer was irrelevant. And then in part three, question one, um, the question was, is it important for people to follow what's happening in the news? So is it important for people to follow what's happening in the news? And you were kind of just talking more about yourself and about why you don't like to, but you didn't answer the question directly. So in these cases, well, first of all, in part three, you need to talk more generally about people rather than about yourself. So in part three, it's important that your focus is on people in general or people in your country or the people you know rather than about yourself. But another thing is if you don't understand the question, you can ask the examiner. You can say, what does that mean? Or, can you repeat the question? So you don't have to answer on the first go, and it won't affect your score. If you ask the examiner to explain, that's no problem. That's no problem for your score whatsoever. So those would be the main things in terms of fluency. A band 7, it's still a good, strong score. For vocab, you would need a wider range of vocab for a higher score. But you don't really make many mistakes. The thing is, if you were to try to improve your vocab from a band 7 to a band 8, that would mean studying vocab for a very long time. Where a lot of students go wrong is they go into the test and they try to use a wider range of vocab, but it's not that you should try to use a wider range of vocab, it's that you need to learn more vocab. So you shouldn't force yourself to use vocab you don't normally use. The best thing is to use the vocab that you can use comfortably. So it would take a long time to improve vocab. I don't think that's necessarily a good idea.
Yeah.
For grammar, it's probably your weakest area. It is a band 7, but it's not far from a band 6. And the most common grammar mistake that you make is with plurals, like one of the best thing instead of one of the best things. And this is your most common mistake with plurals. You said we don't have traffic jam, should have been jams. Some families have good experience, should have been experiences. I like tree, should have been trees. You said a lot of lands. This time land is uncountable, so it should have been land with no S.
Yes.
Most of the newspaper should have been plural. Papers, a lot of newspapers should have been a lot of
Yeah, no singular.
newspapers. Yeah. So those are the most common mistakes. Now there are other little mistakes that you make here and there, some subject verb agreement mistakes. Some article mistakes, but plurals are the most common. So I would say, if anything, if you're working to improve your speaking score, working on your accuracy with plurals would be the best thing for you to do at the moment. So that would be the main one. Moving forward from here, definitely working on plurals would be definitely the best thing for you to do. You needed a band 7 and you got a band 7. So, maybe you want to focus on other parts of the test. Maybe you still need to work on your reading, listening, or writing. So, if they're not to the level you need them to be, focusing on them first would be better. But when it comes to speaking, plurals would be the main focus. And then finally, pronunciation, also a band 7. One thing is your sentence stress isn't always right. So you're stressing too many words in sentences. Your chunking isn't always correct. So chunking is you need to pause in certain parts of each sentence. But what's happened is you're pausing too often. So that's interfering with the chunking as well. So you
Yes.
don't get like a good string. But again, to be honest, that was more in part 1 than it was in part 3, because you weren't pausing as often in part 3. And the last thing is you mispronounce vowel sounds in some words. So for example, the word person, you say person, instead of, like perse, instead of, or maybe like
Schwa. Like
take
schwa sound.
that one, but not necessarily that. It's a variety of vowel sounds that you're doing incorrectly. Like the
So
word
person is right.
right. And then we have taking. You're saying take kung. I can't remember. I didn't write down what you said correctly. A cliche. You're saying a cliche or something. I can't remember exactly the
Cliche. I
correct
say
one.
cliche.
Is right. So it should be cli e
Cliche.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those types of mistakes where the vowel sounds are being pronounced incorrectly. But overall, a very good performance. You've done very well. It seems like you
Thank
will
you,
be able
Robert.
to get the score you need. Do you have any questions for me before we finish there?
Well, I just want to know how can I improve my speaking too much so I can reach to the fluent level or to sound like a native in the future. Can you give me any tips, tricks, how to
Well, I think
speak fluently and freely?
the more you practice, the better it's going to get. So with fluency, it's just about the more you speak, the better you get at doing it. Much the same as, if you're trying to get faster at running, the more you run, the faster you get. The more you speak, the faster you get. It's very much related to just like the more you practice, the easier it becomes, the faster you think of the language, the faster you think of the ideas, all of that stuff. I think maybe practice the format of the test as well. Like practice part 1 a bit more so that you're more used to the types of questions. Practice part 2 a bit more so that you get comfortable with making notes and making a decision about what things you want to talk about. So those would be the main things. But having said that, your fluency is a lot stronger than your grammar. So I would still, bring you back to focusing on grammar. If trying to improve your speaking, if you have the time to do that, plurals would still be the main one to work on. Okay, so Mahmoud got a band 7. Did you think he was going to get that score? Were you expecting it to be a bit higher or a bit lower? Let me know in the comments.